Chapter 21. The Day I Found Him. I woke up that morning with a heaviness in my chest I couldn't shake. Not the kind of heaviness that comes from a bad night's sleep or an overloaded schedule. This was different. This was the kind of weight that felt like it belonged to someone else, like I had accidentally picked up a burden that wasn't mine, but somehow still pressed down on my ribs with the same suffocating force. The coffee I made went cold on the table. My toast sat half-eaten, tasteless in my mouth. I tried to scroll my phone, tried to drown it out with noise, but the feeling didn't budge. It was as if the city itself was whispering my name, telling me, "Go, now, look for him." I knew who him was before I even said his name in my head. My brother, not by blood, but by battles. My partner in nights that almost killed us both. The one who swore to me, eyes glassy and hand shaking, "If you make it out first, you better not forget me." Promised me that. I had promised. And then I broke it. I told myself I couldn't go back into the fire for him without burning myself alive again. I told myself I'd be useless if I relapsed. I told myself that saving him couldn't come before saving me. Those were the logical reasons, the ones that counselors would nod their heads at. But beneath them was the real truth. I was scared. Scared of what I'd find. Scared of what I'd feel. Scared that maybe he didn't want to be saved at all. But that morning, none of those excuses held. The city pulled harder than my fear. So I grabbed my keys, left the coffee untouched, and drove toward downtown without even knowing which street to start on. The city looked different when you walked it with intention. I parked my car near an old bus depot and started on foot, my eyes scanning every face like a detective searching for a fugitive. Except I wasn't looking for a criminal. I was looking for a ghost that still haunted me. The smell hit me first. Rain-soaked concrete mixed with exhaust fumes, fried food from a corner cart, and the faint sourness of too many unwashed clothes huddled under awnings. The sounds followed, the hiss of buses, the strum of a street guitarist trying to earn $1, conversations fractured into half words and tired laughter. I cut through the main strip first, past coffee shops and fast food joints, my pulse quickening at every familiar tilt of a head or slouch of a hoodie. None of them were him, so I kept walking. I moved past the brighter streets into the ones that wore the city's rough skin. Here, the windows were boarded up, the street signs bent, and the sidewalks cracked wide enough to swallow your step if you weren't careful. Here, the faces looked more like his, hollowed out, hardened, weathered by poisons I knew all too well. I saw dozens of men who could have been him, crouched in doorways, sitting cross-legged with paper cups, leaning against brick walls like their bodies were too heavy to hold up anymore. Every time, my chest lurched. Every time hope and fear tangled in my throat, and every time it wasn't him. In one alley, I caught sight of a man bent low, hands shaking as he hovered a lighter under a bent spoon. My stomach knotted. I didn't stop, not because I wanted what he had, but because I remembered too clearly the days when I would have. My legs quickened, like they were running from an old version of me still crouched there, whispering, "Just one more hit, brother, just one more to take the edge off." I kept walking. Hours passed like that, block after block, face after face, hope rising and then collapsing again. The drizzle started, coating the streets in slick reflections, making the neon signs shimmer on the wet pavement. My shoes grew damp. My legs ached. My heart felt like a drum that wouldn't stop its frantic beat. Somewhere in those hours, the question started. Not about whether I'd find him, but about what I'd even do if I did. Would he want to see me? Would he curse me for disappearing all these years? Would he think I was here to preach at him? Or worse, would I find him so far gone that there was nothing left to save? I had no answer. Only the rhythm of my footsteps and the sound of my own breathing, shaky but steady enough to keep me moving. And then, just as I was ready to admit defeat and turn back toward the car, it happened. I saw him. Not in the clear, obvious way where your brain shouts, "That's him." No, it was subtler. The way his shoulders slumped, the tired sway in his walk, like each step was a negotiation with gravity. The shadow of a posture I'd memorized years ago, back when we stumbled through nights side by side. Aaron! The name slipped out before I could swallow it back. He turned, and in that split second, I saw it. Recognition. A flash in his eyes, like a match being struck in the dark. But just as quickly, the flame went out. His face hardened. His voice was thin, strained, ghost-like. "I gotta catch the bus," he muttered, already stepping back, already slipping away. And just like that, he was gone. I stood frozen on the sidewalk, the rain dripping down the back of my neck, my hands limp at my sides. I could have let him go. I could have told myself it was enough to know he was alive, but my chest burned with the truth louder than my fear. I wasn't done. Not yet. I walked back toward the car, my mind a storm, my body shaking with something I couldn't name. Relief? Fear? Rage at myself for waiting this long? I don't know. All I knew was that I couldn't just drive away and let that be the end. Because I had found him, and losing him again wasn't an option. I sat in my car for a long time after he disappeared, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles whitened. The rain had picked up, smearing the windshield into streaks of light and shadow. My chest was on fire with the kind of ache that doesn't let you breathe right. I told myself I'd done enough. I saw him. He was alive. That should have been enough. But it wasn't. Something in me refused to accept that kind of ending. So I turned the key, pulled away from the curb, and drove aimlessly through the maze of downtown streets, my eyes darting to every sidewalk, every bus stop, every hunched figure in a hoodie. I didn't know what I was chasing exactly, maybe him, maybe redemption, maybe the part of myself I'd abandoned when I walked away years ago. And then, like the city was answering a prayer I hadn't said out loud, I saw him again. He was walking along the sidewalk, head down, hoodie pulled tight against the drizzle, his hands buried deep in his pockets. That walk, weary but still moving, I would have known it anywhere. Without thinking, I swerved into an empty parking spot, threw the car in park, and stepped out into the wet night air. "Aaron!" I called again, softer this time, not desperate, not demanding, just real. He froze. His shoulders stiffened, and for a long moment he didn't turn around. I could feel the tension in the space between us, heavy, electric, fragile. Finally, he glanced back. His eyes met mine, wary and glassy. There was recognition there, but also something else. Hurt. Anger. The shadow of betrayal. I lifted my hand slightly like I was approaching a wild animal that might bolt. "I'm not here to drag you anywhere," I said, my voice low. "I just want to sit with you. That's it. No sermons, no judgment. Just sit." Something flickered across his face. Doubt. hope, exhaustion. Then slowly, he gave the faintest nod. We ended up side by side on the curb, the city rushing around us like a river we were both too tired to swim in. The pavement was damp beneath us, the smell of rain mixing with exhaust, and the faint scent of cigarettes from someone smoking down the block. For a while, neither of us spoke. He kept his eyes on the traffic, shoulders hunched, breathing shallowly. I let the silence stretch, resisting the urge to fill it with nervous chatter. Finally, he muttered, "I'm fine." It was barely audible, more reflex than truth. "You're not," I said quietly, "and that's okay. You don't have to be." His jaw tightened, but his shoulders eased just slightly. The words hung between us, fragile but steady. I asked if he'd eaten. He shook his head. I asked if he needed clothes. This time he hesitated, then gave the smallest nod. So we walked, not far, just to a discount store a few blocks away. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as we moved through the aisles. He picked up a pack of socks, a hoodie, and a pair of jeans. He handled them gently, almost reverently, as if he wasn't sure he deserved them. He made little comments here and there about how he used to come to this store, how the cashier used to know him by name. His voice was scratchy, but there were still traces of the person I remembered, buried under the wreckage. At the register, I paid without ceremony. When we stepped back out into the night, he held the bag close, like it was something fragile he couldn't risk losing. We didn't talk about the past. He didn't tell me where he'd been, and I didn't press. Instead, we just walked, past food trucks, past shuttered storefronts, past people who looked too much like our old selves. For the first time in years, we were moving in the same direction again. At one point, he glanced at me and said, almost to himself, "I don't know if I can keep doing this." "Then don't," I replied gently. "Do something else. Do something better. You don't have to figure it all out tonight. Just don't quit on yourself yet." He didn't respond, but he didn't pull away either. That was enough. Hours slipped by unnoticed. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening under the glow of streetlights. The city hummed with its usual restlessness, but for the first time all day I felt a strange, fragile calm. And then, without any build-up, he said the words I hadn't dared hope for. Maybe I should, get help. He said it casually, almost like a joke, but I heard the crack in his voice. I heard the plea under the mask. I didn't leap on it, didn't throw out promises or plans. I just nodded. "If you want, I can take you somewhere tonight." He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time. His eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with exhaustion, but there was something alive in them, something I hadn't seen in years. "Maybe," he whispered. And in that moment, maybe was everything. We didn't say much on the ride. He sat slouched in the passenger seat, his hand gripping the bag of clothes like it was a lifeline. The streetlights flickered across his face, each one revealing a different expression, doubt, exhaustion, maybe even the faintest flicker of hope. I kept my eyes on the road. My chest was tight, but not with fear, with something heavier, responsibility. The treatment center wasn't far, but every block felt like a mile. The silence between us wasn't empty. It was thick, loaded with everything we weren't saying. When I pulled into the small lot, He didn't move. His eyes stayed fixed on the glowing entrance. I could feel the battle raging inside him. "Look," I said quietly, "you don't have to decide everything tonight. Just walk inside. Sit down. That's it. One step. Not forever. Just one step." He stayed frozen for a moment, then slowly opened the door. The air outside was damp and cool. I watched him walk toward the building. Each step looked heavier than the last, like his legs were carrying not just his body, but years of pain. At the door, he paused. For a heartbeat, I thought he might turn back. But then he pushed it open and disappeared inside. I exhaled a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. For the first time in years, I let myself believe maybe, just maybe, he was going to make it. I pulled away from the lot and drove into the city night, past the same blocks I'd walked earlier, past the same faces, the same alleys, but everything felt different now. Not because the city had changed, but because I had. Recovery, I realized, isn't just about refusing what once broke you. It's about walking straight into the same storm, the same streets, the same temptations, the same ghosts, and choosing yourself anyway. I thought that was the end of the story. But then, the next thing I remember is waking up to blinding white lights above me, the sterile smell of antiseptic, the muffled beeping of machines, my body heavy, my chest tight, my throat dry. I was in a hospital bed, and all I could think was one question. Why? Why was I here? Had I relapsed? Had someone pulled a trigger? Had my body finally given out? I didn't know. All I knew was this. When I finally turned my head, through the blur of IV tubes and hospital curtains, I saw another bed, another body, another familiar face, pale and fragile, stitched with pain. It was him, Aaron, my brother in the trenches, and he was barely holding on. The machines hissed, the monitors beeped, nurses moved in and out. Words floated in the air, surgery, complications. We almost lost him. But my mind couldn't catch them. All I could feel was the pounding question that refused to let go. What happened? What happened to him? What happened to me? How did we both end up here side by side in a place where survival hangs by a thread? And just like that, the chapter ended. Not with answers, but with questions so sharp they cut. So there I was, in a hospital bed, staring at the face of the friend I'd been searching for, both of us broken open in ways I couldn't yet understand. And all I could think was this: maybe the story wasn't about finding him. Maybe it was about what we'd have to survive next. And what happens next will surprise you. Book 2 is coming.